And I'm sorry, but after that performance earlier that you gave, and I don't want to be rude, but you know, really, you have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. And the question that I want to ask, that we're all going to ask is, who are you? I'd never heard of you. Nobody in Europe had ever heard of you. I would like to ask you, President, who voted for you?
Years ago, seeing the dangers of a European Commission, a whole union that we learned present day isn't what it was cracked up to be. The leader of the UK Independence Party, Nigel Farage. Nigel, good to have you.
Thank you very much.
Who were you specifically addressing? The unelected, as yet not sworn in president, right?
Yeah, that little dull man that I was talking to there with the glasses.
Who was sweating profusely.
Yeah, he wasn't a happy bunny, was he, at all? He had just been appointed, and I repeat, appointed, the President of Europe, the President of 500 million people, a nondescript bureaucrat named Herman Van Rompuy.
He looks like Professor Irwin Corey, but I digress. Your point was, what are we doing here?
My point was, I mean, I don't want to live in the United States of Europe anyway, because I think that Europe has such different countries, different languages, different histories. But if you were going to build a United States of Europe, surely you wouldn't turn the clock back 1,000 years and abolish democracy and finish up with a president that had been appointed and who cannot be removed. And that was my basic point.
But you got penalised for those remarks.
Yes, they fined me. It was the maximum.
Who fined you?
The European Parliament themselves fined me, and it was the maximum fine that the Parliament could impose. It was €3,000.
And you paid it?
I paid it. I had no choice. They just docked it out of my money.
Really?
But yeah. And this brings into question...
For warning about the very things that are now causing riots across Greece and Europe today?
Oh, riots, and I think much worse to come, to be honest with you.
Why do you say that?
Listen, if you were Greek, I mean, the country that actually invented democracy, and I know the Greeks don't pay their taxes and they have a different culture, but Greece is now ruled by 3 foreign bureaucrats. One from the European Commission, one from the European Central Bank, and one from the IMF, an organisation whose, I'm afraid, gone downhill along with the European Commission.
The same IMF, by the way, that says the world's in for stinkier times, right?
Yes, it does say that today. But
that you agree with?
That I agree with, but what I find extraordinary is that America, of course, provides 18% of the money for the IMF, so American money is actually being used to prop up
But what would you tell us to do, Nigel?
I would say to you, get a grip. You are the biggest player with the IMF. Get a grip. Get rid of this awful woman, Christine Lagarde, who has turned the IMF effectively into an offshore post of the European Commission.
Well, she's been criticizing the way we conduct our fiscal policy in the United States. Some of the criticism was warranted, but she goes after the very people who are trying to correct it, which makes me think she's taking sides.
And paying her vast salary on which she pays no tax. You know, the great battle that's going on, and it's happening in America, it's happening in Europe, this battle of bureaucracy versus democracy, and I want to get democracy back. And people like Herman Van Rompuy and Christine Lagarde at the IMF should not be calling the shots.
You know, they all sound like Hans Christian Andersen characters, but I digress. Do you get a sense, though, that all the world has hit an inflection point? More government, less government. And that's the same in the United States. That's the essence of our election 4 weeks from today. Or am I oversimplifying?
Well, the big difference is this. You actually have an election debate. You know, you can vote for a candidate that goes to Washington and fundamentally changes the tax structure, bureaucracy, the legislation in this country. What's happened in Europe is nation-state democracy has been subverted totally and given to people like the European president. And it doesn't matter how we vote in a British general election, because all we're doing is we're putting into 10 Downing Street a manager, a caretaker.
Yeah, but could I talk to you about some of these characters? You're a huge exception, my friend. They always blame us, like this Barroso character. I want you to listen to this, because I know you have some strong views on this fellow. Some of you might be familiar.
This crisis was not originated in Europe. Since you mentioned North America, this crisis was originated in North America.
Idiot.
I thought he was an idiot, too. Because here's the thing. He sounded French there. I know he's Portuguese, but I know he's lived all over Europe. But we consider him French with the attitude.
Could I just remind people, forget whether he's French, forget whether he's Portuguese.
He's condescending.
He's a former communist. All right?
Really?
So, yeah, he was a Maoist. You know, the most extreme form of communism. Nope. And the European
I had my suspicions.
The European government is dominated by communists and dominated by people that hate.
Well, why can't guys like
America.
you get a role, a prominent role, instead of always being fine for speaking the truth.
I've got a prominent role.
I know that. You're here.
I'm one of the 7 group leaders in the European Parliament.
But their way is the winning way.
Well, at the moment, they've got the majority, but there is a democratic revolution taking place across Northern Europe. In a country like Finland, a party called the True Finns, who are against the bailouts and against this whole crazy system of surrendering democracy, nearly won the general election last year. My party, UKIP, back in the United Kingdom, we've now overtaken the Lib Dems, and we're 3rd in the polls. There is hope, there is optimism. All people need to do is to stand up and start voting differently.
Well, you know what makes you cool? I love people who put people down right in front of their faces.
I've never stabbed anybody in the back. I always do it in the front.
Everyone enjoys that except that Erwin Corey guy, but he...
Well, he didn't like it much.
No, he did not. Nigel Farage, thank you so much.
Thank you.
An honor to have you.